Good evening, councillors, staff, ladies and gentlemen. We wish to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the land we are meeting on, the Whadjuk people. We'd like to pay respect to the elders of the Noongar Nation, past and present, who have walked and cared for the land. And we acknowledge and respect their continuing culture and the contributions made to the life of this city and this region. And I now invite you to bow your head in prayer. Lord, we ask for your blessing upon our city, our community and our council. Guide us in our decision-making to act fairly, without fear or favour, and with compassion, integrity and honesty. May we show true leadership, be inclusive of all, and guide the city of Wanneroo to a prosperous future that all may share. We ask this in your name. Amen. Thank you. Item 1, as per the agenda, attendances. Attendances as per the record. Item 2, apologies. We have an apology from Councillor Brett Treeby. Item 3, public question and statement time. We have 2 statements to be made and questions. So if I could please ask Mr. Carl White to come to the podium. If you could clearly state your name and address for our records, please. Thank you and welcome, Mr. White.
My name is Carl White. I represent Cedarwood's properties of 50 Collins Street, West Perth. Thank you, Mayor, Councillors, CEO and Senior Executive of the City of Wanneroo. Firstly, I'd like to thank Councillor Paul Miles for representing his constituents in putting forward item MN03, report and recommendation. I also thank the councillors who support the recommendation to return $3,092,677 to Cell 1 landowners. Councillors may recall from previous submissions, and as confirmed by the report, this refund does not create a financial risk for the city. There will remain in Cell 1 sufficient funds for the only 2 cell acquisition payments that remain. Outstanding payment 1, the historic POS credit, is a fixed amount. Payment is triggered when the landowner subdivides. There is no compulsory acquisition. The same subdivision also triggers additional revenue to Cell 1. Our calculation of lot yield shows the net transaction to be revenue positive. Outstanding payment 2, the acquisition of just over 6,000 square metres of public open space, is tied to the purchase of the same site by the Education Department for a primary school. The POS is to form part of the primary school playing field. Again, there is no compulsory acquisition by the city. The acquisition is triggered by the Education Department. There are no extended, contested nor costly acquisition processes arising from the 2 remaining cell acquisitions, reinforcing the sufficiency of available funds. I have made a commitment to Councillor Miles and the City Executive, and on behalf of the key landowners of Cell 1, including the Satterley Property Group and Pete Limited, that we make no further requests for pre-funding the return of surplus funds, but rather we make ourselves available to work collaboratively with the City to facilitate the timely closure of Cell 1 in its entirety. The $3 million we are asking to be returned is part of the funds that were over-collected over 10 years ago. I am therefore thankful for the report MN03 and respectfully ask for your collective support for the recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you for that statement, Mr. White. I'd now like to invite to the podium Mr. Len Kosova, and if you could clearly state your name and address prior to making your statement. Thank you and welcome.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Is it okay if I demask while I'm speaking? Thank you. Len Kosova of LK Advisory, Suite 3, number 1, Wexford Street, Subiaco. Should I put my mask back on, Madam Mayor? Okay, sorry. I've always been a rule breaker. I'm going to take my glasses off because they fog up otherwise, so you have to forgive me.
was taking that into consideration. So if you do find it uncomfortable and you can't, then remove the mask and put your glasses back on,
fine.
please. Thank you.
I can talk in mud, so the mask will present no obstacle for me. Good evening, Madam Mayor and councillors. With the Mayor's discretion and permission, I'd like to just make a brief statement in support of item MN03-0222, which is the same item as my client Carl previously discussed. On behalf of my clients Cedarwoods, Pete and Sadley, the primary developers of Cell 1, I'm here simply to ask Council to please give your support to the motion before you. The motion acknowledges that the Cell 1 account balance has increased to just over $5 million as at 31 December 2021, which is $61,000 more than was reported to Council when you last considered this matter in December 2021. This funding is sufficient to pay the Tranche 2 refund and to cover all remaining Cell 1 costs, which were previously reported as approximately $1.9 million. This would leave a surplus of almost $9,000 without accounting for estimated future contribution income, which we calculate would range anywhere from $1.69 million to $3.38 million, together with interest earnings of around $50,000 to $70,000 per annum. Whilst it's not specifically mentioned in the motion, it is worth recognising that the City has the power to control the timing of the remaining land acquisition, and it's under no compulsion to accelerate that any faster than the landowners affected would desire. Furthermore, the negotiated acquisition that is involved in both of these cases does not come with the same risks, costs or issues as a compulsory land taking, and therefore does not trigger the same concerns as would arise with a potential claim for compensation. Both the remaining areas of POS acquisition, as Carl has already stated, are contained within land holdings that themselves possess further subdivision and development potential, and will therefore trigger payment of a contribution to offset the acquisition cost of the POS. Of these two POS areas, one is a historical POS credit that will be paid at a fixed amount, and the other adjoins a future school site which will first need to be acquired by the Education Department. On this basis, our view is the City is under no pressure whatsoever to be the first mover in this acquisition. Lastly, I would just like to reiterate, Madam Mayor and councillors, as Carl has already explained, that at no point that I've been aware of in any of the submissions made by these three developers have they ever spoken about a Tranche 3 payment. So if that's of any consolation, Council can be assured that there is not a further request for return of funds waiting in the wings beyond this. So, Madam Mayor and councillors, I thank you for your reconsideration of this request. I thank Mark and his team also for no doubt working with Councillor Miles to put this motion together, and respectfully ask for your support for the motion, given that in our view it presents no material risk to the City. Thank you.
Thank you for that statement, Mr. Kusova. I would now like to invite Mrs. Smart to make an announcement and also advise the rules of question time. Thank you. Mrs. Smart.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just in regards to tonight's meeting, I will confirm that the audio proceedings of tonight's meeting will be live broadcast online, with the exception of matters being discussed behind closed doors, and that broadcast will remain available via the City of Wanneroo website following the conclusion of the meeting. Also, in regards to the COVID-19 pandemic situation, the City of Wanneroo, being committed to the safety of all attendees at public meetings, requests that all adhere to the Western Australian State Government health directives and wear masks at all times whilst in the building. With regards to the rules of public question time, Madam Mayor, the members of public wishing to ask a question are to state his or her name and address before asking a question. If the question relates to an item on the agenda, the item number and title should also be stated. Each person seeking to ask questions during public question time may address the Council for a maximum of 3 minutes each. Public questions and statements are to relate to the business of the local government and should not be a personal statement or opinion. Only questions related to matters affecting the local government will be considered, and only questions that relate to the purpose of the meeting will be considered if for a special council meeting, Madam Mayor. Questions may be taken on notice and responded to after the meeting, and questions may not be directed at specific council members or city employees. Questions are not to be framed in such a way as to reflect adversely on a particular council member or a city employee. And first priority has been given to persons who are asking questions relating to items on the current councillor meeting agenda or providing statements to the same and have registered prior to the meeting. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mrs Smart. We do have a question from Mr Hugh Newen. Mr Newen, if you would kindly state your name and address for our records. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Hugh Newen, 42 The Broadview in Lansdale. Madam Mayor, I have questions in relation to two matters this evening. So before asking the question for each, I will give a little bit of a background for the sake of members of the council who are not familiar.
Mr Newen, if you could clearly state your questions, that's actually, and if it's appropriate to an item on the agenda, if you could let us know what item it is on the agenda. Thank you.
These questions don't relate to items on the agenda. They are in relation to local matters, local issues.
Okay, so if I can ask you to please ask your questions and then we will answer them, we'll endeavour to answer them from council. Thank you.
Okay, am I allowed to then give a little bit of background detail within the 10 minutes?
A brief preamble, because it's 3
Yes.
minutes of question time, so you're allowed 3 minutes
In total, or is it?
in total.
Okay,
Thank you.
all right. In relation to the first issue, I'd like to ask administration a question about the Warradale Jetty Replacement Program. This project was one that I advocated for during my term as a councillor, and it has been dragging on for about 2.5 years now. I was informed in August last year by administration that the project would be completed by the 17th of December 2021. To date, not much work has been done, and my question to the city is that does the city consider it respectful, acceptable and professional to the ratepayers and the community in general for a project which is very, very looked forward to by the community? And my understanding is that there has been no update provided to the community whatsoever as to the reason for the delay.
Thank you for that question, Mr Newen. I'll ask Mr Singh when you've concluded your questions. Thank you. And Mr Singh will be able to respond.
Sorry?
Did you have another question to ask?
Okay. My next question relates to a separate matter, which is the roundabout on Hartman and Kingsway in Manly. Now, a request was made by myself back in 2020 for this particular roundabout and a couple of other roundabouts in the area to be cleared of vegetation because they were blocking the sight line of motorists and was becoming extremely dangerous. To date, the roundabout on Kingsway and Hartman Drive have got vegetation on there, which is probably in excess of 1.2 metres high, thereby blocking the sight line of motorists. I take that roundabout every day, I know. My question to the city is, what is the city waiting for? Is the city waiting for a fatality crash before it takes action on a fairly simple matter? Thank you.
Thank you for those questions, Mr Newen. I'll ask Mr Singh to respond.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Regarding the first question on the Warradale Jetty, the contract for the construction of or replacement of Warradale Jetty was awarded in July 2021. The works were scheduled to start originally in September and finish by 17th of December. That's the advice which was provided previously. As we come across certain issues there, the groundwater level in that area has risen. That resulted in the lake water level too high for our contractor to access the site. So we waited for the water level to be suitable, and the contractor has started work in January, and they're due to be finished in April 2022.
Thank you, Mr Singh.
And regarding the second question on the vegetation at the various roundabouts, my understanding is some work has been done on different roundabouts, but I'm happy to have another look at the roundabouts mentioned tonight and then arrange maintenance works.
Thank you, Mr Singh, and thank you, Mr Newen. Are there any further questions from the gallery?
Madam Mayor, may I ask a follow-up question on the answer from Mr Singh regarding the first issue?
a brief question? Thank
Yes.
you. Yes, for clarification
Yes,
purposes.
that's correct.
Thank you. Yes.
The question is, has residents been informed or updated about the delay at all?
Thank you for that question. Mr. Singh?
Madam Mayor, I need to take some advice on this one from the project team. If we haven't advised the residents, we will be happy to advise them.
Thank you. There being no further questions from the public, I declare public question time closed. And thank you for those statements, gentlemen, and also thank you for those questions. Moving on to item 4, confirmation of minutes. We have 2 sets of minutes. The OC01, Ordinary Council meetings held on the 7th of December 2021, and minutes for the special council meeting held on the 24th of January 2022. Can I please have a mover and seconder for those minutes? Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Thank you, Councillor Civic. There be no objections. I declare those minutes carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 5, announcements by the Mayor without discussion. Councillors, it's with a great deal of pleasure that I announce a recognition of the city's success at the Fowler Local Government Children's Policy Awards. And I would certainly like to take a moment to celebrate the city's achievements. Late last year, the City of Wanneroo received 2 awards at the Public Health Advocacy Institute of WA's 11th Annual Local Government Children's Policy Awards. The awards promote and celebrate local governments that demonstrate outstanding commitment to building and maintaining environments that support the health of children. The city was extremely proud to win the Young Children Making a Difference Award and the COVID-19 Recovery and Response category, thanks to exceptional work spearheaded by the city's Community and Place, Childhood and Youth Services team. The Young Children Making a Difference in Communities Award recognised the city's long-term focus on youth leadership through the School Leadership Programme, a long-running city programme that aims to empower our next generation of community champions to develop solutions to local issues. The 2021 School Leadership Programme saw 83 students from 9 local primary and secondary schools take part. With the support of the city's youth team and school mentors, participating young people identified a concern or opportunity in their local community, then created and implemented an innovative community action project focused on positive, sustainable initiatives. By inspiring and building capability in young people, the city is empowering young emerging leaders to make a positive difference in their communities, not just for the duration of the project, but well into the future. The city also took top honours in the COVID-19 Recovery and Response category. This award recognised the city's efforts to support children and young people whose access to city services and resources was impacted by COVID-19 lockdowns and restrictions. This included the introduction of the city's library's Click and Collect programme and a move to online youth activities, including at-home cooking, art and craft activities. The award also recognised the city's development of a recovery plan for families, which provided advice, safety guidelines and information on support services. At the request of the Department of Communities, this invaluable resource was shared across all early years networks within our state. These incredible efforts to support and empower young people are so important for our large and fast-growing city. Currently, the city is home to almost 50,000 young people, and by 2026, we expect this will increase to over 67,000 young people. So it is of particular importance that we understand their needs and target our activities and services accordingly. Thank you to the Public Health Advocacy Institute of WA for recognising and acknowledging the work of local governments in this very important space. And a huge congratulations to the teams involved in bringing these initiatives to life and living the city's commitment to promoting and delivering public health initiatives that ensure our young people feel valued, empowered and supported to reach their full potential. And I am really pleased to officially present the awards to Director of Community and Place, Mrs. Terrelling and her team. Thank you. and in also an aside comment, but to see the young students engage and take real ownership of their projects is absolutely fantastic to see. Their sense of pride in being involved in decision making within the city, and obviously their initiatives being listened to means a lot to them. Item 6, questions from council members. Do we have questions? Yes, Councillor Herridge.
Thanks, Mayor. I'd like to ask administration if they are aware of the excess water that's been pooling down at Warradale and the Broadview Parks in Lansdale over the past winters, and if there's anything that has been looked into for the cause.
Thank you. Mr Singh?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, administration is aware of the rising groundwater level in Warradale and Broadview Parks. There are two lakes. As we have just spoken about Warradale Jetty, as part of preparing that project, we did some hydrology analysis for that particular site. That has indicated, and we have confirmed that on site, the groundwater level has risen in recent times, and that has caused some water to stay in the swales, which are all around the lake. That particular park and swales do receive a lot of stormwater from surrounding catchment, which is in excess of 150 hectares of the area. The action we are proposing is to, first of all, we'll be identifying all the outlets coming in those two parks and making them more visible to improve the safety around that place, and clean all those stormwater outlets and the pipes. As a trial, we'll be also removing some of the turf and the soil from one swale just to try to understand what actually is happening in that area. And we will be engaging a consultant to undertake further hydrology analysis to understand the reasons for the rising groundwater in that area, and then look at some options. One of the initial options which has been flagged is the considering installing in that area living wetlands or living stream wetlands. So we'll analyze the hydrology report first and then come up with some options.
Thank you, Mr Singh, and thank you, Councillor Harris, for that question. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. My question is to the Chief Executive Officer in regards to upgrading the city's website. I'd like to put this on the official public record in terms of getting some commitment from administration in regards to the upgrade of the city's website. I've had verbal conversations, I've lodged CRMs, and I'd like this on the public record to see some progress happening with this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Mr CEO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'll perhaps provide some context. At the moment, the city has been pursuing some upgrades of some of its key enterprise software systems. So our attention has been on the upgrade of the finance system, the payroll system, and also the asset system. We do have, however, the city's website upgrade as a project for this year and next financial year, but I might ask the Director of Corporate Strategy and Performance to provide an update.
Thank you, Mr Sims. Mrs Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. The CEO's really summarised as it is. We have the web page in the budget already, and it has not been able to start because of the work on the other projects. We just don't have the resources to do multiple at once. So once we've got the finance one finished, we'll be able to move on to the website one, which means it will go into next financial year as well. But it does take a bit of effort to then do some analysis of requirements and then obviously go through a process of tender to acquire a service to assist with the build of it. So I can see it taking most of this year and probably into some of the next year, because some of it will also be updating content as well as actually rearranging the site and giving better tools. It also rolls into our next major enterprise project, which is also a customer service project. So it's actually handy to do the two very close together, because one will obviously feed into the other. So the timing is important that it is with that next enterprise project, whereas if we do it now, we might make it look different, but we won't have been able to add all the customer process to it as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Jennings. Mr CEO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. What I can advise council is, subject to being able to schedule a workshop with the elected council, one of our very first early steps will be running a workshop with elected council to understand what are the requirements and functionality you would like to see. And in the interim, and I know Councillor Wright is on our Business and Tourism Working Group, we will shortly be launching the Business Wanneroo website, which is a very different website platform to the city's main website platform, and I think we'll be able to see some interesting interaction with our business customers on that platform.
Thank you, Mr Sims. Further questions of elected members? Yes, Councillor Aitken.
Thank you. With the current COVID situation and the legalisation of rapid antigen tests, there are probably millions of rapid antigen tests that are going to be given over a period of time. People have them in their homes, local businesses have them. As once they're used, this is technically medical waste. What is the process going to be used for discarding them? Should people be advised to put them in recycling, which in fact they could be contaminated? Do they go in landfill? What is the process that we are going to advise and advocate for the discarding of these rapid antigen tests after use?
Thank you, Councillor Aitken. Mr Sims.
For you, Madam Mayor, and thank you, Councillor Aitken, for that very good question. My first response will be we will escalate that question to the State COVID Coordination Committee and seek some advice at a state level first. The City of Wanneroo, like many local governments, has been taking the lead from state to government directions and orders in this regard. So a very good question, and happy to escalate it to the right authority to get some guidance first and then provide that answer to council.
Thank you.
That's excellent. Thank you for that. And if we could make it fairly quick, because people are already using them and they don't know how to officially discard them. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Further questions? There be no further questions. That concludes item 6. Item 7, petitions. We have 0 petitions. Item 8, reports. So, councillors, if you have a declaration of interest, if you could please highlight it at the appropriate report. Can I please have a mover and seconder for PS01? Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Thank you, Councillor Herridge. Councillor Rowe, you wish to speak to this item?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to say that the report's very comprehensive.
Thank you, Councillor Herridge. Thank you. There been no objections to this report? Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to have a follow-up question with the Director. And I didn't see it in the report, but my question was, is the property that's currently at that lot, is that to be demolished, or are they just going to convert the existing house into the apartments? I was just trying to work out how they was going ahead with it.
Thank you. Mr Bowring.
Thank you. Through you, Madam Mayor. My understanding is the intention is to retain the building and subdivide it and modify it to accommodate units. Thank you.
So, councillors, a recommendation PS01. If I could please ask you to cast your vote and on the electric notepad. Thank you. That's it. Thank you. So I declare that carried, and we have 1 opposition, Councillor Huntley. Thank you. Moving on to item PS02. Can I please have a mover and seconder for PS02? Thank you, Councillor Civic. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Parker. Councillor Civic, you wish to speak to this item?
Madam Mayor, this particular item is fairly thorough. It's pretty self-explanatory. The city doesn't really get involved in too many dividing fences disputes. If there are any, they are referred to a magistrate's court in general. So I'm quite happy with this particular item to go through, Madam Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Parker in seconding. Okay, thank you. There's no objections to PS02. If I could please ask you to cast your vote. Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to assets, we have got 0 reports from assets, community and place. Can I please have a mover and seconder for CP01? Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Thank you, Councillor Civitan. Councillor Rowe, you wish to speak to this item? Councillor Civitan?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you. So there'd be no objections to CP01. If I could please ask you to cast your vote. Thank you. And declare that carried unanimously. CP02, can I please have a mover and seconder for CP02? Thank you, Councillor Miles, and thank you, Councillor Baker. Councillor Miles, you wish to speak to this item?
Mayor, no, I think it's a very good report that administration had done in regard to the skate park and up at Grandis Park. It is a well-used facility. And I think the advent of going out for public consultation for the lighting, I think, is something that has definitely been brought up with me on several occasions. It is a bit dark in that corner where the facility is, and I think some of the parents nearby would like to have the lighting a little bit brighter in that corner so they can see what's going on across the oval as a whole. And they also are looking forward to the boundary fence, which is supposed to be going in shortly as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Councillor Baker?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor. It's a good report. The report speaks for itself, stands on its own legs. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillors, there be no objections to CP02 or Councillor Huntley?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm just wondering if I could make an amendment to the recommendations, and that is for the recommendation number 2 does not support the request for additional seating, to actually remove that and then amend item 5 to where it says engagement policy to assess the level of community support for floodlights, add in there CCTV and additional seating. I'm just wondering if we could actually take this for community engagement rather than actually not support that request straight away.
Thank you, Councillor Huntley. So your amendment is to remove 2, as in does not support the request for additional seating.
Yeah.
And also to include CCTV.
And additional seating after the floodlight.
And additional seating. I might just, before I go for a second, do the seconder or seek a seconder, I might ask Mrs. Terrelink, because I'm mindful that the city does have mobile CCTV. Mrs. Terrelink, would you like to make comment on the CCTV and also the seating? Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. In regard to the CCTV, yes, the city has now got 3 mobile CCTV poles that we are able to deploy to various locations based on information, whether that's from the community or from the police or our internal observations. In regard to the seating, I think we have indicated that the additional seating is not required based on what we would normally include under Local Planning Policy 4.3. So, yes, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Mrs. Terrelink. Councillor Huntley, given the response back from the director, firstly in relation to the CCTV, so we already have the mobile CCTV towers. In relation to the additional seating with regards to the policy, do you wish to continue with the amendment and seek a seconder?
Yes, Madam Mayor. I'd actually continue with them both because that allows the community to have a say. They may actually say that there's no need for CCTV at the present time. So I do think if we're going out to public consultation to actually give them an opportunity, and I know there is enough seating at the park, but it may be the fact that the community come back and say, yes, there is enough seating, but it's in the wrong place. So it might just mean that we may have to move some seating. And I think to give the public that chance to have their say might be a really good thing. If we're writing to them anyway, shall we just add it in? I can't see that would do any damage to us whatsoever.
Thank you, Councillor Huntley. So, councillors, Councillor Huntley has flagged an amendment and explained the reason why. You've heard from the director. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Sangali. So Councillor Huntley, you've already explained the reason for the amendment. Would you like to make additional comments, or happy with what you've already said?
No, I'm happy, thank you.
Thank
Madam
you.
Mayor.
Councillor Sangali?
Sorry. Only that I think that's a really great idea to be able to go out to community engagement and to include a range of things in there. As when we design skate parks or anything, we always include the community in there. So if we are going to make any changes or suggest changes, it's only right that the community have a say in that.
Thank you, Councillor Sangali. So, councillors, we've got the motion as move the recommendation, and we've also got an amendment. So we've got an amendment, moved Councillor Huntley, seconded Councillor Sangali. I'm going to put the amendment. And you've had a read of the amendment. So, councillors, if you could please vote on the amendment. Oh, Councillor Sangali.
Just taking on Councillor Huntley's comments earlier with number 5, rather than locking it into and additional seating, could it be and additional or relocation of seating? So that way we're not shooting ourselves in the foot straight away.
Yep, can take that on board. So if that could be reflected as part of the amendment, please.
So additional / relocation.
Relocation of seating. Thank you. So we have that amendment and the reasons put. Councillors, if you could please cast your vote. I haven't got it yet. We've still got the amendment on the screen. Are we ready for voting yet? Yes. Okay, so we need... Who's not voted? Councillor Coetzee? Okay. Okay, thank you. Declare that carried unanimously. So going back to the substantive recommendation, move Councillor Miles, seconded Councillor Baker as amended. If we could please cast your vote. Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. And thank you for that amendment, Councillor Huntley and Councillor Sangali. Moving to the CP03, can I please have a mover and seconder for CP03? Thank you, Councillor Wright. Have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Civic. Councillor Wright, you wish to speak to this item?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Civic?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor. There being no objections, if I could please ask you to cast your vote. Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillors, moving through to corporate strategy and performance. So CS01, can I please have a mover and seconder for CS01? Thank you, Councillor Rowe. And you'll have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Miles. Councillor Rowe, you wish to speak to this item?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Councillor Miles? Councillors, been no objections. If I could please ask you to cast your vote. Declare that carried unanimously. CS02, can I please have a mover and seconder for CS02? Thank you, Councillor Baker. You have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Miles.
Madam Mayor, a couple of questions, please.
Yes, absolutely, Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, just a question regarding, just a moment, page 157 of the agenda. Line item is line item 414. The payee is Let's All Party, and the particulars read Entertainment Splendid Park. Did that relate to the Australia Day event held at Splendid Park this year by the sub-branch of the Yanchep Tirox RSL, please? Or was it a different event? I'm not sure.
Thank you, Mrs Jennings.
The Australia Day event.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll have to take that on notice, please.
Thank you. Any further questions?
Yes, Madam Mayor, I'll just be very brief. I've just got them dog-eared. Just bear with me. Just a moment. Yes, Madam Mayor, another question regarding the same itemisation. The page number is page number 205 of the agenda. The line item is 1430. It refers to the payee being PayPal, and the particulars read, as I read it, 7 Microsoft Office 2021 Home and Business Councillor machines. Well, what were those machines? Were they actually machines as such, or were they electronic devices such as an iPad, home computer, please?
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Mrs Jennings?
Thank you, Mayor. I will take that on notice, please.
Thank you.
Last one?
Yes, Councillor Baker?
Promise. Okay, page, where are we? 181 of the agenda. Line number is 875. The payee reads Objective Corporation Limited, and it reads License-Trapeze Professional, $41,000. What's the nature of the trapeze? Is it actually what it means? It says what it means, trapeze professional, or is it another term? I don't know what it is, basically. 41 grand for a trapeze professional. I suppose every trapeze artist would say they're a professional, but I don't know if it relates to a trapeze artist. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Mrs Jennings?
Thank you, Mayor. Trapeze is one of the pieces of software we use for some of the building approvals, so it just happens to be the name of the company.
I should have gathered that, sorry.
Thank you for that clarification, Mrs Jennings. Any further questions with regard to CSO2, councillors? It's been moved, Councillor Baker, and seconded, Councillor Miles. There's been no objections. If you could please cast your vote. Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to CSO3, can I please have a mover and seconder for CSO3? Thank you, Councillor Miles. Seconded, Councillor Civic. Councillor Miles? Councillor Civic? There being no objections, councillors, can I please ask you to cast your vote? Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. CSO4, can I please have a mover and seconder for CSO4? Thank you, Councillor Rowe. And seconded, thank you, Councillor Wright. Wish to speak to this item? No. There be no objections, questions? If I could please ask you to cast your vote, CSO4. Councillor Nguyen, if you could please cast your vote. Thank you. Declare that carried unanimously. CSO5, can I please have a mover and seconder for CSO5? Thank you, Councillor Berry. Thank you, Councillor Miles. Councillor Berry, you wish to speak to this item?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Okay, will there be no objections? If you could please cast your vote. I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. CSO6, can I please have a mover and seconder for CSO6? Okay, I'm happy to move this. Thank you. Seconded, Councillor Rowe. I'll take the report as read. And Councillor Rowe, you wish to speak in seconding? Okay. There be no objections. Councillors, if you could please cast your votes. Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. CSO7, Strategic and Business Planning, the annual report. I'm happy to move the annual report. Seconded by Councillor Civic. Thank you. The City's annual report is a comprehensive report of the activities within our city. We are one of the largest and fastest growing local governments in Australia, and our annual report is reflective of our opportunities, our challenges and our achievements. And I commend the recommendation to you. Councillor Civic.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. A very well prepared document, and I think it covers all of what's happened within the city over the past 12 months. And yes, very, very pleased with the document. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Baker, you to speak to this item.
Yes, and just ask a brief question. Yes, please, Madam Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Baker.
I like the layout, the presentation of the report. It doesn't appear to be the usual boring old report with black ink on white paper. The cover, I think, is fantastic. It's more of a coffee table style magazine, and it sort of encourages you to open it up, check the index and read. But just a question, under the State Records Act, of course, the city is required to have a records management plan. I think our only plan was approved back in 2018. I'm not sure if that's due for review. But does the report contain an annual report confirming that the city is complying with its records management plan of 2018 as per the requirements of the State Records Act 2001, please?
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Mr. CEO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I note on page 170 of the annual report provides reference to the State's Record Act, but I might ask the Director of Corporate Strategy and Performance to answer the specific question.
Thank you. Mrs. Jennings.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. It is on page 170 and it's headed, it's in the second column of page 170, goes the full length of that second column and into the first column of page 171. And it talks about having an approved record keeping plan, which, yes, it is 2018 and it's a 5-year plan. So consequently, it is up to date. And it also talks about some of the measures that we have to ensure that our record keeping is kept up to date, including our team and our practices and training and awareness training that we take. So it's all in as required in those two 1.5 columns within 170, 171.
Thank you, Mrs. Jennings. Councillor Baker, you
Yes,
have
just a supplementary. My understanding, yes, just a
Thank
supplementary in response to the answer. My understanding is that under our Records Management Plan 2018, the annual report is required to contain almost like a certificate confirming that, yes, we as a city for this for the financial year just gone, have complied with our record management plans. I couldn't find that actual document or that statement. I acknowledge what has been said in terms of what the report says in relation to the Act or obligations, but my understanding is that under our plan we have to, each annual report, certify that we have in fact complied with the terms of our annual records keeping plan under the policy of 2018. That's the question.
Thank you, Mrs. Jennings. Can you please respond to the subsequent question?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, this is exactly as required under the State Records Act. We do have this audited, of course. So, yes, it has been looked at. In fact, I think it's in the current audit plan as well. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Jennings. So the annual report, yes, Councillor Parker, you should speak to the item or ask a question? Thank you, Councillor Parker.
I highly commend this report. I would again like to congratulate Mrs. Jennings and her entire team for the annual report. A huge amount of work is required to ensure compliance with the city's financial and strategic performance. The fact that once again this report will be entered into the Australian Reporting Awards for adjudication shows how committed the city's administration is to transparency and improvement going forward. Thank you, everyone concerned, and thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Speakers against? Speakers for? No, I move this motion, so I will close the debate, and I would like to say, so our previous annual report, we received an award for Best in Sector, I believe, Mrs. Jennings. So hopefully this annual report, we will also achieve an award. Once again, thank you to you and your team, and echo Councillor Parker's comments. Councillors, if you could please cast your vote for the recommendation. Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. Councillors, moving on to property services. We have 5 reports on property services. I understand that we also have impartiality interests. Councillors, I know that these items have been to Quorum, so I'm looking at putting these, I'll go to declarations, but I'm looking at putting these items on block. Are there any exceptions? We have exceptions? Okay, I'll take them one at a time. So can I please have a mover and seconder for CS08? Okay, thank you, Kutsia. And thank you, Councillor Aitken. Councillor Kutsia, you wish to speak to CS08?
Thank you, yes. Thank you to Edmund for doing this thorough report. I cannot wait for this upgrade to happen, as we have a very busy beach there, very warm water, really nice lagoon, the best lagoon in Perth, and swimming area, I think, in the whole of Perth. It's about time for this area to be upgraded, and I think the community cannot wait. Thank you.
Well said, Councillor Aitken.
Yes, I remember when we first moved the current lessee in there, and the work they had to do to get it together to be fit for purpose. They're doing a fantastic job down there. I commend them, and I thank administration for looking into the circumstances at refurbishment as well, and look forward for this business getting stronger and stronger in that area. Thank you.
Thank you. So we've got a mover and seconder, and I see a hand up. So Councillor Baker, you wish to speak to this item?
Yes, please, Madam
Thank
Mayor,
you.
if I can. Yes, I'm also excited by the redevelopment plans that the city has underway, especially the front deck area that's proposed. That'll be great, sitting out there having a drink on a warmish day, hopefully not a 40-degree day, you'd melt. And also the extension of the defined area being the licensed premises proper. My understanding is it will be extended out the back. My understanding is that any lease would have to be subject to a condition precedent, that the Liquor Licensing Commission, as a condition precedent, approves the lease, of course. I did have a few concerns. One concern, to be frank, is does the developer or the proponent of the proposed redevelopment of the Yanchep Surf Lifesaving site, the former site, are they aware of what we're doing? Because, in effect, we're creating now a bigger and perhaps better competitor. And of course, I think I've got a couple of outstanding CRMs regarding the current status of the negotiations in respect to the redevelopment of the old Surf Club site. That's one concern. The other concern I had was, in terms of the overall lagoon redevelopment master plan, how likely is it that within the next, say, 5 to 10 years, that as part and parcel of that, the implementation of that master plan, that this facility, the current facility, as renovated by us, will in effect be required to be bulldozed to make way for another better improved facility. That's the other thing I'm concerned about as well. 600,000 is a lot of money. I know it'll be indirectly amortised into the rent, which is good, but are there any, well, can anyone tell me whether or not the proponent of the redevelopment of the old surf club is aware of what's being proposed here? And also, in terms of timeframes, what is the likely timeframe for this parcel of land to be further redeveloped during the course of the implementation of the Yanchep Lagoon redevelopment plan? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Mrs Jennings, can you please respond?
Thank you, Mayor. The old surf life-saving proponent was part of the Yanchep Lagoon master planning. He's well aware that we'll be doing some more work at this particular site. It was either going to be moved immediately or some work done on this one. So it's known to that person, that group. And in terms of the length of time, this particular building with this change in it gives it at least another 10 to 15 years life. And my understanding where we're up to with the lagoon is that the master plan, as I say, had this as one of the first projects, as well as the old Surf Life Saving Club. So I don't think there'll be any need to move it earlier than that time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs Jennings. So we've had the mover and seconder. Questions asked. The speakers for. Councillor Berry.
Thank you, Mayor. I'd just like to congratulate administration and everybody involved, and I'm particularly pleased to see it's inclusive of people with a disability in terms of the reconfiguration of the toilets and changing rooms. Thank you.
Thank you. Speakers against. Further speakers for. Councillor Rowe.
Thanks, Mayor. And I know there's a bit of a gap between Yanchep and Girraween, but I have been up to this business and I can speak to the strong relationship that the business owner has with the community, the quality of the food as well. And I know that with the growing suburb up there in Yanchep, the proposed redevelopment and expansion will be very, very well received.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Speakers against? Speakers for? Going to put the recommendation. All those in favour, if you could please cast your votes, or against. And that's carried unanimously. And for those who are not in the room but are listening in, I can tell you every single councillor's got a big smile on their faces at this resolution. Much loved area within the city of Wanneroo. CS09, so we have two impartialities. Councillor Herridge.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. With regard to item CS09-0222, proposed ground lease to the Department of Communities over 800 Highclere Boulevard, which is Marangaroo Hepburn Centre, I disclose that I am an ordinary board member of the Hepburn Centre, and as a consequence there may be a perception that my impartiality on the matter may be affected. I declare that I will consider this matter on its merits and vote accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Herridge. Councillor Rowe.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. In relation to CS09-0222, I'd also like to declare an impartiality interest as I'm also an ordinary board member at the Hepburn Centre. As a consequence, there may be a perception of my impartiality on the matter, but I declare that I will consider this on its merit and vote accordingly.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Do you have a mover for CS09? Thank you, Councillor Parker. Do you have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Civic. Councillor Parker, you wish to speak to this item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm pleased to see that this proposed lease to the Department of Communities is before Council. The approval of the lease will ensure the Hepburn Centre, which has for many years provided vital services to the community, can continue. The Hepburn Centre will have security going forward, as will the many other organisations that call this wonderful, caring space home. Thank you to all concerned for ensuring this happened. Thanks, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Councillor Civic.
No, thank you, Madam Mayor. All covered well.
Thank you. Speakers for? Speakers against? Yes, question, Councillor Miles.
Just a quick question. Thank you, Mayor. Following on from last week, the question I had with the Department of Communities is obviously negotiating this lease on behalf of obviously the Hepburn Centre with the city. Can administration just clarify what the process is there, whether it is direct lease to the communities and then communities are negotiating with Hepburn, or there's sort of a round robin between the three entities?
Thank you. Mrs Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. We're negotiating with communities. Communities have whatever relationship they have with the centre. We're not totally across what that is, but the communities' negotiation has changed over time. So anyway, we continue to negotiate with communities at this point.
Thank you, Mrs Jennings. Speakers for? Speakers against? Councillors, if I could please ask you to cast your vote. Thank you. Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. CS10, but Councillor Rowe, you have impartiality.
Thanks, Mayor. Yes, in relation to CS10-0222, I'll be declaring impartiality as I work for a member of the State Parliament who is involved in securing an election commitment for the Northern Suburbs Men's Shed. As a consequence, there may be a perception that my impartiality on this matter may be affected. However, I declare that I will consider this matter on its merits and vote accordingly.
Thank you. Can I please have a mover and seconder for CS10? Thank you, Councillor Huntley. Do I have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Civic. Councillor Huntley, you wish to speak to this item?
Thank you, Madam Mayor.
No. Councillor Civic, seconding.
Only to say it is good now that the men's shed has a home, and they will be able to, I guess, enjoy this particular property for a long time. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Civic. Speakers for? Councillor Nguyen.
I'd like to put forward an amended recommendation, but I got a number of questions first before I do that. Is that okay, Mayor?
Well, yes, if you'd like to ask your questions prior to your amendment. Yes, thank you, Councillor Nguyen.
This is in relation to the provision of services for the site. If you go to page 405, the estimated cost of connecting water, sewer, electrical services is approximately $223,000. And on page 408, the estimate is around $650,000. Can you explain the difference between the two estimates and whether they are for that particular lot or are they for the entire 3 lots?
So, Mrs Jennings, if you could please respond.
Thank you, Mayor. The information on page 408, you'll see comes under the heading Land Excision. So this is something that's separate from the lease, but the Department of Lands is looking at a proposal of it perhaps being an excision, as in it has to be separated out from the other lots. If that happens, then the costs of servicing are higher because it's a totally separate piece of land. Whereas the estimate that we've got, and you'll see it's the same in others for that same area of land, is if it was all kept together. So at this point, we don't know the final costs of servicing yet for this particular piece of land, depending on how it is processed by the state government. Hence, we've just done the general part in the provisions section on page 405. But the report clearly shows that if the Department of Planning and Lands does something different, then there might be a different cost, but it's not yet known.
So is it one or the other, or one in addition to the other?
Thank you, Councillor Nguyen. Mrs Jennings, if you could please respond.
Thank you, Mayor. It's one or the other.
Okay. And just in relation to, let's say the cost is $650,000, is that the total cost for the 3 lots, or is that just for the men's shed lot?
Thank you. Mrs Jennings.
So the cost on the other page is for all 3 lots, but on this page under land excision is purely about the land excision situation. So that's different. So it'll be about this particular lot.
I see. So what that means is if that incision does apply, then the cost that may be applicable to men's shed would be that incision cost of $223,000 plus some portion of that $650,000. So that's to be shared between the 3 proposed tenants.
Yeah, that's right.
Mrs Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. It's either or. So the 650 is only if that becomes its own separate piece of land.
Okay.
Whereas the 223 is across the whole proportion if they stay together.
Okay.
It will be that cost anyway.
Okay, so it's either or. So if we approve this lease, would that be shared between the 3 lessees?
Mrs Jennings.
Mayor, the approving of the lease doesn't impact on that. It's quite separate. So what this gives them is a ground lease so that they've got some certainty to go ahead with various, trying for different funds or whatever they may have. When it comes to the servicing cost, we've got in the lease there will be some contribution, but we don't know how much. So it's the 223 is across all 3, but the 650 is it's a different piece of information depending on the excision of the land. But approving the lease doesn't have an impact on that. We still have to deal with that later.
Yes, I guess just so you understand the reason why I'm asking this question, because part of my amendment is to ask the city to bear that connection cost. And I'll go into detail why I do that. And so it's quite important, I guess, to understand what that cost is, what that cost look like, either for the city or for the tenant to bear. So if it's $650 just for one lot, that's an extraordinary amount for any tenant to having to pay.
Thank you, Mrs. Jennings.
Sorry, Mayor, I'm not sure what the question is in that one.
I think Councillor Newen was asking about the clarification and and before he actually puts his amendment to ask for the city to pay for that cost. So it's just a little bit of clarification on the cost of the works.
Thank you, Mayor. I can't actually give you a clarification on the cost at this point because we don't know, with the accession of land being an option that's up in the air, and it's not our decision, it's the Department of Lands, and we have to talk to them because we'd like to have this clarified and make it simpler. But if it's across all three, we'll be negotiating with all three about the costs. But if there's an excision of land which is only being looked at this parcel of land, because the Department of Lands is concerned with the availability of the site to all members of the public. So that's the question that's up in the air. But if you're asking, do we have the funds to pay for it? No, there's nothing in the budget. So that could, if you're going to ask for that, it'll probably delay the project because we'll need to find some funds in the forward planning.
Thank you, Mrs. Jennings. Do you have a subsequent question, Councillor?
No,
Newen?
I'd like to go ahead with my sort of amendment to the recommendation.
Sorry, Councillor Newen. Councillor Miles has got his hands, requests a question.
Yeah, thank you. Just to go on, I just wanted to re-clarify something I'd asked last week, and I think the Director of Planning answered it, because I asked the same question, whether or not the men's shed is the right zoning for the men's shed. That's what I asked last week, and the report is indicating that the Department of Lands is suggesting that the zoning would probably have to change. That's the way I'm reading it. And that's why the accession would have to happen, and then a zoning would have to be placed on that land. And maybe if administration could just clarify that, because that was the question I was asking last week.
Yes, you did, Councillor Miles, and I'll actually redirect that through to the Director of Planning, Mr. Dixon.
Thank you. And through you, Madam Mayor, no, I think as is clarified in the report on page 404, I think administration sought clarification as to whether the men's shed was an appropriate community purpose use for the regional open space. That was administration's view. We sought confirmation from senior staff at the Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage, and they confirmed administration's view that the scope of the activities being considered at the time would be considered by the department as being consistent with the purpose of the regional open space reserve.
Thank you, Mr. Dixon. Councillor Miles?
So I guess I have to follow up. Would the Department, obviously, of Planning have had any discussions with the Department of Lands? Because it's obviously their understanding there may need to be accession. So that's where the conflict is in this particular item. Planning are saying we think it's okay because it's a public use, it's a public need. I get all of that. But then you've got another agency in their little silo that are saying, oh, no, that doesn't fit. We want it to be excised. So that's where the conflict's coming here. And it's the city that's going to have to obviously make good for these three lots, for these community services.
Thank you. Mrs. Jennings?
Thank you, Mayor. The Department of Planning, Lands and Heritage is one department, and their only concern is not about the zoning, it's about the, and I'll read it here, but it says on page 407, just under the heading land excision,
DPLH expressed concern that NSMS is operating in a manner which is not consistent with the high order MRS reservation applicable to Reserve 28058. That's not about what they're doing, it's more about the how, because they're concerned that not all community members will be able to participate in the Northern Suburbs Men's Shed.
Thank you, Mrs Jennings. Councillor Baker, did you have a question?
Just a quick one, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
In a nutshell, isn't it the city's policy historically to carry the cost of the headworks associated with the development of this kind? My understanding is that the city may have agreed in principle with the proponent of the redevelopment of the old Yanchep Surf Lifesaving site to carry the head costs, those costs. And my understanding is that that applied in respect of the owners of Portofino's restaurant when they redeveloped part of the old Quinns Rocks caravan park site back in whenever it was, XYZ years ago. Isn't that the case? We would normally carry the headworks, I would have thought. Pay for the headworks, in other words. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Mrs Jennings?
Thank you, Mayor. It's generally a developer that would do this. I mean, in the case of the Yanchep, it hasn't obviously occurred yet, but where there's headworks that will be used for more than just that one site, then yes, we will be, and we'll only expect a contribution from that particular development based on what they will use, and that would be similar to what we're doing in this case as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. Speakers, Councillor Nguyen.
Sorry, just to get some clarification on the comment by the Director earlier about the men's shed being limited to just men only, and that created some issue with the department. But I know there are a number of organisations that are simply for example, women or for men, but they cater for that group because it's important that, you know, particularly for men's shed, I think they have certain equipment that might need to be used in a safe environment and may not be suitable for women, for example.
Thank you. Mr CEO?
Madam Mayor, if it assists Councillor, I think Mrs Jennings deliberately provided a quote from the department as opposed to the city's opinion on this matter. I think Mrs Jennings was purely just conveying a position of the government department that the city is liaising with.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to go ahead with my amendment to the recommendation. So the amendment proposes to change the cost payable from the lessee to the city being the landlord in relation to the headworks. That's the connection cost of services and utilities. The reason why I propose this change is because the cost right now is quite significant. It certainly will make it very difficult for Men's Shed to go ahead with this project, and we know the amazing things that they have done for the community. And I had the opportunity to discuss the matter with Ken and Kim Broad, Chairman of the Men's Shed, earlier today regarding their concerns. And I'd like to acknowledge, the tireless efforts and work that Men's Shed and its members do for the community. And I know that they have they're unable to attend tonight's meeting personally because of COVID. It's not convenient for them to attend, but I know that they are tuning in tonight. Now, Men's Shed relies on funding from its membership. They do some projects and fundraising like sausage sizzles. most of the membership fees used to pay their existing rent right now. So they don't have a lot. They have received $1 million funding from the state government, Margaret Quirk, but that's still not enough, and that's only for the building. How much funding or how much fundraising would they need? How much sausages do they need to sell to actually get this 200 and something thousand or $600,000 for the utility connections? On my maths, $1 a sausage times, so that's 200,000 or 600 and something thousand sausages to sell. That could take a very long time to get that done and get this project ahead. Now, this particular site is quite an important site because we know that they have been looking for a home for a very long time, and they're renting out of Wangara and they're looking for a permanent home. Kingsway is located within 11 retirement villages, so it's central to a lot of their members, which I know there are some 12,000 men over the age of 55s live in the surrounding area. I was told that the city has one of the highest suicide rates. Mental illness, we know, is quite prevalent during this period, especially during COVID. Many members of Menachet are senior citizens, so being able to travel to the location is an important factor for their membership. And if they have to travel a further distance, then obviously that's going to affect their goal and vision for the future. I know that they have done a feasibility study some time ago and some business case studies, and that really supports the case for Menachet to be there. So it's important that if we don't change this particular cost, it would be very difficult for them to proceed with the proposed offer that we're giving them. The cost of building the building alone, I think, while they haven't put forward any plan, but I'm told it could be, up to $3 million. And right now they're still relying on further fundings in addition to the $1 million that they receive. Now, the lease, we know that after 20 years, the city will get to inherit this building after the finish of the lease. So it is part of this community's infrastructure. And the shed, this will enable the shed to expand its activities and its reach in our community. And this lease will obviously be an important part of that, that goal for them. With this particular development on Kingsway, the shed will be able to engage a wider section of our community, diversify its activities, develop new partnerships, and have a permanent place, a new home that will reflect its vision of being a place where belonging matters, and that is their goal, and that is their vision. And I'm looking at one of what the association aims to do is to improve the well-being of men in our region through mateship and share activities to add value to our community. So they've done a number of projects for our community that include, I won't go through them more, supporting the native animal rescue by providing possum nesting boxes. They've designed, constructed and installed outdoor stage to support kids, staff and parents of Greenwood Primary School. They've built mini libraries and pantries for the Clarkson and Mirwah Good Start Early Learning Centres. So they have done, a lot for the community, especially for men's health and mental well-being. And I think if we don't give this opportunity for the shed to be able to start without having to incur this cost, and right now it's very uncertain as well for them to even start this project because administration right now can't tell us what the actual cost is, and if they can't work this out on their part of their budget, I don't know if I know that they're committed to this site. It'll just be taking a lot longer for them to construct this building, and I hope that if we can give them the funding, it may not be in this budget, but maybe for the next, that would be ideal. And I've worked out what the daily rate is. So if you work out the maximum amount that you have to pay for this site, that's $650,000, and you work out over a 20-year period on a daily amount, it's only $90 a day. $90 a day.
Thank you, Councillor Nguyen. So could you just refer us to the wording of your amendment, please? I know you've spoken to that, but I don't believe we've got the amendment on the screen.
Okay.
And I did allow you to go additional time over moving.
So that I guess despite any of the other provisions, the city will pay for the cost of
Mayor, can I just ask a question of CEO?
I'm just sorry. Thank you, Councillor
Yeah.
Miles. I know I'm just waiting on the clarification of the amendment. Then I will allow that question. So the city will pay for the cost of
number one. It's got to be checked.
services and utilities. So for all required services and utilities.
of all services and utilities. Thank you. I need to go to the director because the director has indicated in a previous response to you that she does not know what the cost will be, and also advised that this item has not been budgeted for. I'm mindful, like you said, that it might not be next financial year, this financial year, but I'm mindful of the time frame. So your comments that you've made, I'm just going to seek clarification from Mrs. Jennings. Just to reiterate, I don't know what the cost will be.
Thank you, Mayor. We have the amount in the budget this year for the car park because the city's already contributing $450,000 for that. But there are no other funds in the budget either this year or future years. And also, as you say, we do not know the cost at this point.
And also, I'd like to clarify a comment that you made, Councillor Nguyen, in that the state member for Lansdale has contributed $1 million, but you mentioned $3 million in your discussions with the Northern Suburbs mentioned.
That's what I've been told, that it could cost them up to $3 million.
Okay, so
But,
councillors, it's we've got an amendment. We've got an amendment. I'll go to Councillor Miles in a minute. We've got an amendment in front of us, which is. I mean, we don't underestimate ever the men's sheds that within our city, and we've actually got 4 men's sheds and the amazing work that they do. But I'm mindful of the additional information that's being brought forward, and council may need to consider whether they wish to refer this back for further consideration, given the proposal put forward from Councillor Nguyen, which is still on the table and hasn't been seconded yet. Councillor Miles, you have a question? Yeah,
look, just my question is, item 1, at the end there, it says the Northern Suburbs membership in accordance with the essential lease terms described in the administration report. So should that item of providing a lot, maybe it should be providing a lot that is serviced being item 1 because it's in a different section to that. I seek advice from the CEO, but it's sort of contradictory because you've got one bit up there saying the report is what we're authorised, and then we're adding in a third dot point.
Thank you. Mr CEO.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. If it assists Council, I think perhaps what the Director of Corporate Strategy and Performance was alluding to is there are two different issues here. One is the lease and one is, I think, the conversation led by Councillor Nguyen in terms of the cost associated with the essential services. And I think the complication is trying to link the two through an amendment. So I'm not clear then how best to describe the amendment.
So
certainly an option for Council, and I'll look to Councillor Nguyen, could be instead of amending 1 and 2, you could add an additional recommendation that sort of requests the CEO to provide a report back to Council on clarification of the service and utility costs and funding options available, which would then allow administration to verify the costings and also provide Council with some funding options, because I think, as Mrs Jennings was alluding to, at the moment we do not have any funds in the budget. I don't know if that would address what Councillor Nguyen is trying to do, but at the same time being able to treat the lease and the service costs separate. I might just ask the Director of Corporate Strategy and Performance, in terms of the consultation that has occurred with the Northern Suburbs Men Shed, are they aware of the lease as presented?
Thank you, Mr CEO. Mrs Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, they are, and they have looked at it a couple of times and agreed and know that it's at Council tonight so that they can get the lease approved. And they're keen, as far as I understand, they're keen for it to go through.
So thank you, Madam Mayor. So if Councillor Nguyen wishes me to assist further, I could provide some wording in that regard.
Maybe assist in terms of the amendment. So rather than amend the recommendation, if we can amend the point in the terms of the lease, that's on page 405, replacing the word in the box provision of or upgrade of all required services, what would be undertaken by the city with a contribution by the leasee. So if you delete, but with a cost contribution by the leasee, so works will be undertaken by the city at the by the city at the city's cost. So that's it for the excision, and if you so then that deals with the potential costs arising from the connection of services to the land. So we're then presenting the essential terms as amended.
Thank you, Councillor Nguyen, and I take on board your suggestion, but you're actually not amending the content of the report. It's actually the recommendation that you'll be seeking to amend. So the Chief Executive Officer is quite right that the change of wording will need to be as per the recommendation and not the content of the report. So, Mr CEO, could you just reiterate what you said earlier? Thank you.
I think Councillor Nguyen's intention is to actually seek a council resolution to address the issue of the costs now, which would mean I would suggest adding some additional words to recommendation 1, which I think is what Councillor Nguyen is alluding to. But Councillor Nguyen would need to word it in a way that instructs the schedule on page 405 to be amended to address the change in the essential term to do with leasee works. A provision, yeah.
But that's not in the budget, and mindful if that's not in the budget and we don't know what the cost is, as explained by the Director. Thank you. Councillor Civic.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I'd like to move a procedural motion to send this back, and the reasons being, I'm just not clear and satisfied. We're talking about headworks cost and sewage, etc. We know there's an allocation of 400,000 for car parks, etc. we are here voting on this particular lease tonight, which I'm reasonably happy with in terms of what's there, but we're just not clear on what the costs are going to be. And as Mrs Jennings indicated, it's an and/or situation. I'm just not clear of what these figures are going to be, whether it's going to be in the city's interest in terms of the overall costs, and we could be in for some surprises, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Civic. I understand the intent, but we're mindful that you actually seconded the motion. So do we have a move of a procedural motion to refer this back? Thank you, Councillor Rowe. And do we have a seconder to refer this back? Thank you, Councillor Herridge. So we've got a procedural motion to refer this back, moved Councillor Rowe and seconded Councillor Herridge, for further clarification from the Director in relation to the items that's been raised by Councillor Newen and the responses that's been received from Mrs Jennings and the suggestion by the Chief Executive Officer. So we have a procedural motion. If I could please ask you to cast your vote for the procedural motion.
Mayor, I just wanted to also, in that, if you're going to refer it back, can we also seek some proper clarification from the Department of Lands? Because that's where the contention is. They're either going to allow us to have a $200,000 cost or a $600,000 cost, and that's just within one department, not knowing what the other's doing. So that's the important chink here. And bearing in mind that we've got a great contribution from the member down there, we don't need to be haggling over a little bit of a servicing.
Yep. If I can, please, Madam Mayor. Please, thank you.
Question, Councillor Baker.
It's a follow-up on, I think, the whole discussion tonight. Tell me, the men's shed, are they acting through a lawyer or are they self-represented? Because, without being cruel, they may be clueless.
This is a procedural motion, a question on the procedural motion. Councillor Baker.
Will the report that's being proposed, will that deal with that issue as well? Are they being represented? Do they fully understand the ins and outs of leases, headworks, costs, development?
This is a procedural motion.
I support the procedural motion.
And we will go through that process as just clearly outlined, which is Councillor Newen's thoughts that is raised and also the responses by the Director, Mrs Jennings. So we have a procedural motion to refer this back and obviously to articulate and respond to the questions that have been raised by elected members.
Madam Mayor, in relation to the procedural motion, would the mover and seconder, would that also bring the other two leases into that similar situation? That's my worry there. So when we get to those items,
this is in relation, Councillor Civic, to CS10.
Thank you.
This is in item CS10 only. So, councillors, we have a procedural motion. Mrs Jennings.
I'm sorry, Mayor, the motion's moved, but I was a bit concerned when it was still up there that we'd mixed up what Councillor Miles had asked for and the investigation of the costs, because it said investigate the costs from the Department of Lands, and it's not them that's doing the costs. Well, they're doing the excision, but it's just the wording wasn't quite right. So
I think Councillor Miles is going to clarify whether excision is in place.
Yeah. I think it's we can capture the comments that have been raised, the concerns that have been raised, and the responses that have been made for this particular item. So now we have a procedural motion that's been moved and seconded. Can I please
Mayor,
ask you?
just to go on with, and I think just to clarify, I think the Councillor Civic made a good comment. The next two leases, which is the Wildflower and the other one, are somewhat connected because there's a car park involved and still water involved.
That's right, but Mrs Jennings, I understand this is the northern suburbs, men's shed. Could you please clarify? Because we will be dealing with the other item in the next particular, I will allow that question. And councillors, normally procedural motions, it's put and carried, but I am, because of the sensitivity, I am allowing questions. But the item with the Wildflower will be CS11, but I will allow your question to Mrs Jennings on CS11, even though we are dealing with CS10.
thank you, Mayor. Yes, they are related, the two items, but they do have to be, because they're items, it'll be one at a time. So there's slight difference in that this, the other one doesn't have an accession question, but it's still got servicing as well.
Yeah. Yep, so
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Just to the Minute Clerk, just to capture Mrs Jennings and Councillor Miles's comments, it's clarification of the accession process, I think, is the key, not the actual costs. Is that correct, Councillor Miles?
thank you. So putting the procedural motion, if I could please ask you to cast your votes. Okay, declare that carried with 1 against. Thank you. Councillor Nguyen. Thank you. Moving on to item CS11, which is the ground lease of the Wildflower Society of Western Australia. Can I please have a mover and seconder? Thank you, Councillor Berry. Seconded, Councillor Wright. Councillor Berry.
Can we please do exactly the same as we just did on the previous item, to refer back to admin for clarification? As on page 417.
Yes, Councillor Berry, you moved the substantive, so you can't move the procedural. But Councillor Civic.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I would like to move a procedural motion on this particular item, pretty much based on the similar terms and conditions that have been brought up in the previous item, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Civic. Do we have a seconder for the procedural motion? Thank you, Councillor Huntley. Councillors putting the procedural motion, if you could please cast your vote. Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. CS12. Can I please have a mover and seconder for CS12? Thank you, Councillor Wright. Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Councillor Wright, you wish to speak to this item?
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe.
No, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Speakers for? Against? Putting the recommendation CS12. All those in favour? Oh, sorry. Councillor Miles.
I just have to ask the question, I guess, of administration. On 425, it does say that the lessee is going to have to seek funding for lessee works to the satisfaction. So are we in the same situation where they've got to pay for the upgrades to water, sewage and obviously the driveway or the road that's got to go in there?
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Mrs Jennings.
Thank you, Mayor. You will see on page 426, I think it's the third box down, there's no mention of the servicing cost, and that's because in this particular case it is in an area that has got fully serviced area in it. It's right next to some residential as well.
Thank you. So we've got the mover and seconder. We have speakers for, speakers against. Councillors, if you could please cast your vote. Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. CS13, can I please have a mover and seconder for CS13? Thank you, Councillor Berry. Seconded, Councillor Sangali. There be no objections to CS13. If you could please cast your vote. No, it's not. Yeah, it is. I think we're there yet. Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you, councillors. That concludes the corporate strategy and performance. Moving on to advocacy and economic development. Can I please have a mover and seconder for CEO1? Thank you, Councillor Wright, and thank you, Councillor Parker. Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I apologise in advance for my passion and excitement for our agriculture sector, particularly our farmers in the city. I'd like to start off by saying a massive thank you to Steve and the economic development team for their fierce advocacy and consultation with the agriculture sector and farmers over the past years, taking the time to get to know our growers throughout the city. Tonight, I will be supporting and endorsing the City's submission wholeheartedly for the following reasons by highlighting some key points that stood out to me. A 10% cut to groundwater for parks, gardens and recreation is ridiculous, considering we have many spaces and parks as a large growth council and struggle to cope already. A 10% cut will leave the city worse off and cause a lack of visual appeal across the area. I'm a big supporter of our farmers through our strong connections historically and believe they are essential to Wanneroo and to the WA economy, producing 35% of the state's strawberries, 68% sweet corn, 20% capsicums and beans and 22% cabbages. During this pandemic, they have kept food on our tables and lights on in our local eateries and supermarkets. The reliance by Water Corp and the state government on the Ningara water mound is unsustainable, and I have one key message for them: bugger off and leave our farmers alone. Instead, focus on bringing forward the Alkimos desalination plant, find alternative water sources and gradual decommissioning of Water Corp bores to allow for stabilisation. Mayor, I think this submission by Mr Marmion and administration is a no-brainer and should be supported in its entirety. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Councillor Parker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I strongly support administration's submission on the groundwater allocation plan and thank Mr Marmion and your team for your work on the submission. To say the plan is inadequate is a gross understatement. It is beyond me as to why the city finds itself in a position where it is stating the obvious. It is a well-documented fact that groundwater is not a reliable source of water, more so in Perth that has high temperatures and minimal rainfall, and yet state governments have failed to deliver the desalination plant or recycled wastewater treatment plant for the well-known and documented growth in the Northern Corridor. I was shocked to find out that West Australia is the only Australian state not to have implemented the National Water Initiative. Agribusiness in the city of Wanneroo and outlying areas is vital and must be supported and assisted at all levels of government. This plan is catastrophic to years of hard work and effort our growers have put into their land and is unacceptable. If COVID has highlighted one thing, it's the need to be self-sufficient. In closing, I would like to use a well-documented saying: reduce your groundwater usage, reuse through recycled wastewater treatment plants, and recycle by building a desalination plant. Reduce, reuse and recycle. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Parker. Speakers for? Thank you, Councillor Baker.
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. Just to touch upon a couple of the matters that were raised by previous speakers, the bottom line is this: we do need new, further innovative desalination plants. There's simply no issue there, no issue whatsoever. It gets back to money. And the same in relation to wastewater recycling plants, of course, using the same reasoning, either recycled via a plant or injected into aquifers. It makes sense. It's the way of the future. No matter what's going to happen, we're not going to make it rain. You can't, vote or legislate to make it rain. And the point is, the state government has got a massive budget surplus, an absolutely massive budget surplus. They can afford to fully mainstream and put into operation the desal plant at Alkimos today, and they can look building another one up at Caravan somewhere further north. That is the future. That's the reality. We should start this process now, rather than pretending that, if you like, the heavens are going to open up when the aquifers are running dry. Common sense, spend the money. It's an investment. Thanks.
Thank you. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Civic.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, I certainly endorse the city's position on this. I've been in Wanneroo since 1967, and I actually worked for the Shire in 1978 when was here in 78 when the Water Corporation announced that they were going to actually start to abstract water from the mound. Things have changed over the last 30 years. I'm really concerned about our horticulturalists. In history, since the settlement of Perth, horticulturalists have been pushed further out and out and out, and to the point where the lands where they used to be have become industrial and urbanised over the last 150, getting close to nearly 200 years. My view is that we do need desalination plants, but they're still a thing in the future. The Water Corporation, as Councillor Baker said, certainly make a lot of money. With a drying climate and the denuding of the landscape, in fact, I think the water tables in some areas are starting to rise, and that worries me a little if they do abstract, that there could be Some salt, as in the wheat belt, and denuding in the wheat belt has risen water tables there to the point that we have a massive salt problems, but this may not occur in the coastal plain. But on the overall, I'm really happy with the report that the city's put up. We need to fight for our horticulturalists to make sure that they can sustain a living and we can hold that area for quite a few more years, and in fact actually extend the horticultural belts that they have survival. And the Water Corporation indeed are taking back as many water licences as they can get their hands on if they're not being used. And we've been through the sterility problems in terms of land which doesn't have water licences. But on the overall, I support this, and let's just hope we can get common sense out of this for our growers. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Civic. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Aitken.
Thank you, Mayor. I find it absolutely despicable that the state government wants to decrease the amount of water our market gardeners are able to use. Our market gardeners are part of the food bowl for Western Australia. In fact, during COVID, we had a steady supply of fresh food. If we lose our market gardeners because of the decreased allowance of water so that they can't produce product, we are dependent on overseas and eastern state imports. This creates a biohazard for our state, potentially bringing in dangerous bugs or viruses for our market gardens. It is despicable that our market gardeners have not had their water licences increased. They are amongst the most efficient market gardeners in the world in how they manage water, the way they drip feed and they mulch their gardens. Their water licences should be increased so that they are able to increase their production. They're able to use land that is now sterile because there is no water for them to be able to use. And in fact, if they were able to increase their production, they would be able to export, which would increase the income within the City of Wanneroo and within our state. This is a despicable action on behalf of the state government, and I ask that my fellow councillors support this report that the city has brought together, and I thank administration for doing it. Thank you.
Thank you. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Miles.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. It's been a long road with the Nangara Groundwater Allocation Plan, and I do want to thank the economic team that's led by Steve Marmion, who has been guided by our CEO to obviously put the report together, and through the guidance of council. I did have a look at the our aim was to obviously bring on earlier than 2028 the desalination plant at Alkimos. I made a point of having a look on the websites. I was always championing the idea of groundwater recharge, but it's very clear that we need not only the recharge, but we also need the desalination plant. You know, with the future northern coast expanding anything up to 500,000 people over the next 25 to 30 years, there's going to be a need to have the water for people to drink and the water to be able to plant not only our food, but also where our children play, our grandchildren play. I do not like the current commitment by the government. I do not want to live in a desolate suburb. I do not want to see stuff blowing down my street because nobody can water anymore or anything like that. It is a matter of we want to live in a nice place. We're in the best place as it is in Perth and in Wanneroo in particular, down here at the end of the world where nothing can touch us. So why can't we make it a great place to live, grow our food locally so we know what we've got being grown locally, we can eat, and it is good for us. And I totally support the submission that we're putting forward, and to some extent, CEO, I think we might need to put this on our advocacy program going forward to bring that desalination plant on sooner rather than later.
Thank you. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Nguyen.
Just a couple of questions, if I may. Just in relation to the water users, do we know who are the main water users, comparing, for example, the different industry, farming, mining, and other industries?
Thank you. Mr Marmion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Through you. It's mostly outlined in the report what the growers are using. We've also been put into the report what the Water Corp are using, and the groundwater allocation plan is pretty clear on what everyone is using at the moment. So yeah, it's pretty well known. But we've cross-referenced this report, the groundwater allocation plan, with the Water Corp annual report just to get some more detail on that.
And this proposed 10%, that's similar to the notion of compulsory acquisition in terms of land, is that right?
Mr Marmion.
I'm not an expert on compulsory acquisition of land, Madam Mayor, but I guess you could compare it.
And there's right now no compensation mechanism for our farmers in terms of the Act or any relevant, policy right now.
Mr Marmion.
Through you, Madam Mayor, thank you for the question. That's correct. There is currently no compensation being spoken about with the plan.
Look, I've got nothing further to add because my friend Linda Akin has put it quite eloquently, so thank you.
Thank you. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Baker, you've already spoken. You have a question?
Just a question, please, Madam Mayor.
Thank you.
To Mr Marmion. Steve, wouldn't you agree that it's absolutely ludicrous that the Waters and Rivers Commission does not have a record of where residential bores are located? I think it's, I might recall that. I don't think I can refer to what was said at the relevant meeting because it was a forum and etc. But wouldn't you agree that it's just ludicrous? Yet when it comes to commercial bore owners, they police their use of their bores with meters, I might add, which are checked regularly, as we're all aware.
Thank you, Mr Marmion.
That should be a separate and distinct submission.
Mr.
How the hell can they say?
Sorry, Councillor Baker, I'm actually directing your question through to Mr Marmion to respond.
Yeah,
thank you.
Thanks,
Mr Marmion.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thank you for the interesting question. I think I'll answer it by saying that the more data that the department has, the better for making decisions. And yes, they don't have that data, so I find it difficult that they can make the decision without that data. That's how I'll answer that one.
Thank you. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillors, I'd just like to make a few comments in relation to the submission. And the City of Wanneroo has got a long history with the growers and of our community and has been side by side, shoulder to shoulder in support of them every step of the way. And I'd like to commend Mr Marmion and his team on the significant collaboration and consultation with our growers, listening to them. We have a certain degree of pride in how successful that they are within the City of Wanneroo, but also they're also very highly regarded in this around Western Australia and also the world with their export. Many of them came from pioneering families working the land when there was no running water, no electricity, and indeed no roads. I do recall a couple of years ago when the Shire of Bruce Rock, their only grocery store in town burnt down. And I remember the Shire President, Stephen Strange, contacting me, absolutely devastated. They didn't have a carrot stick or a glass of milk in town. And he rang me shortly afterwards, there's a few phone calls made, and over the hill came the refrigerated trucks of City of Wanneroo produce to support the local community of Bruce Rock. So that relationship and that sense of respect and understanding and the sheer generosity of those growers is to be absolutely commended. This submission is reflective of the respect and the support that they deserve from us as a local government and as a community. And I absolutely support the submission. Speakers against? Councillor Wright, I don't think you need the right of reply, so I'm going to put the recommendation. If you could please cast your vote. Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. Mr CEO, you have a declaration.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'd like to declare impartial interest in item C0222, as there are several aspects of the proposed local government reform that relates to the functions and role of the Chief Executive Officer position.
Thank you. Councillors, can I have a mover and seconder for CEO2? Thank you, Councillor Baker. Do we have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Miles. Councillor Baker, you wish to speak to this item?
Yes, thanks, Madam Mayor. I'll be very brief. It's a very good comprehensive report, a very comprehensive submission, very, very detailed. But of course, we don't know what the final pudding will look like. There may be several drafts, so to speak, before we actually see what the final product will be. There are many provisions in the Act which need improvement. As you're well aware, at least in my view, for example, all council meetings should be recorded, all council meetings. Special council meetings, you name it, all recorded, all documented, amongst other things for openness and transparency, but also so that we comply with our State Records Act obligations. There are various aspects to the proposed reviews, I should say the proposed new measures, which I think will not see the light of day. My understanding is that even if hypothetically all of our submissions are agreed to, either collectively by WELGA or individually by local government authorities, it'll take probably a year and a half before the actual bill will see the light of day. And there may be a need for consequential amendments to the various regulations that are made pursuant to the provisions of the Local Government Act. So great review, very thorough. It's been checked, double-checked, etc. Every I is dotted, every T is crossed. And yes, I encourage members to support our submission. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Miles?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Look, I do look forward to seeing the outcome of the submissions that have been presented by the local governments around the state on behalf of their residents and ratepayers, as well as obviously the WELGA submission that will follow up as well on behalf of those other councils and other areas that probably won't do one. There are some red herrings in the reform process. I think that was just deliberate to get people away from some of the more other issues that the department and probably the minister would like to reform and push through. There isn't actually anything in there that I would be alarmed at, apart from the changing of the voting. First past the post works excellent for local government and should never be tampered with. As soon as you bring in preference deals and the like, you will automatically then bring in politics on a much larger scale, very similar to New South Wales. I know people say that there's politics at local government in WA, but I can assure people it is not anywhere near what is happening on the East Coast on a constant basis. And one of the reasons for that is first past the post. There are some other items in there that I'm really looking forward to seeing the Minister approve, because there are some of the items that I believe local government does need. The Act itself is not that much out of date. It just needed a tidy up. I do think that some areas of the election process do need tidying up. I'm totally in support of having a grace period of no meetings prior to elections. That just goes the same as local governments, as state governments and federal governments. I do think there needs to be some better checking on how postal votes are being cast and whether somebody is really doing that postal vote. There is no auditing on whether people are actually the ones sending in those envelopes. And I think that's a serious flaw in local government postal voting. And we see that at the last local government elections. There was some stuff on the TV news and other newspapers that had happened in other areas. It didn't happen in our area, but it does happen. With all that said, Mayor, I can't wait to see some of the submissions going in and some of the responses by the current Minister.
Thank you. Speakers for? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Mayor. I've carefully reviewed the City's submission on the reforms, and agree with majority of the city's stances on these items. However, I would like to highlight some of the areas of concern to me and to the community I represent. Just note, I will be respecting council's decision, even though they go against my own personal views. One of the key points that I had concerns about was 3.5 CEO KPIs. I believe this should be made public to assist in supporting more transparency, and that this approach would inform the community of the CEO's performance related to the strategic direction and operational function of the local government. 4.8 candidate profiles. I believe there needs to be more information about candidates to assist electors in making an informed decision when casting their vote, and respectfully decline the city's viewpoint on this item. Point 3, 5.2.2, council's role. I believe council should be involved in how the organisation is structured, because the CEO's role is to manage the day-to-day operations of an organisation. As a council, we should be able to change the organisational structure that the CEO operates within, and that the CEO's role is to manage the operations within that structure that is determined by council, as it will increase efficiency and provide council with more power to be able to eliminate any misspending and inefficiencies within the organisation. I endorse the WA Local Government Reform Alliance on this item. Mayor, I will be supporting this submission, as majority of the items are supporting the recommendations of the reforms. However, the highlighted items I have talked about are still of great concern to me and my community. In providing more power for council to be able to make the organisation more efficient and more transparent. I hope that the local government minister will bring these items into force when the process is finished. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Speakers against? Speakers for? Putting the recommendation, if you could please cast your vote. Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to CEO3. Can I please have a mover and seconder for CEO3? Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Thank you, Councillor Miles. Councillor Rowe, you wish to speak to this item? Councillor Miles? And speakers for? Speakers against?
Questions?
Yes, question, Councillor Baker.
CEO3, yes. Yes. Page 512 of the agenda refers to the recommendation. It says that the relevant period will be 6 months from the date of this resolution, and it's contingent on the extent of a COVID-19 outbreak as determined by the CEO. That could affect providing services and facilities. There's a lot of provisos, so to speak, in that big preamble. Now, my understanding is that the WA border is gradually opening up on a pin-step basis. It seems that the Premier is using a policy of incrementalism rather than being seen to do a huge backflip. He's using the incrementalist approach. And I've got no doubt whatsoever that the WA border will be fully opened following the next federal election, win, lose or draw for either party. It's already happening. There was an announcement this afternoon that 6,000 foreign students can come back to Perth. I mean, anyhow, I'm a cynic, I won't go further than that. But the bottom line is this: why do we have to have council meetings held via electronic means? And if you look at paragraph 1 of the actual wording of the recommendation, it says it will be the Mayor, in consultation with the CEO, who will determine that the conduct of ordinary council meetings and special council meetings are to be held via electronic means. What about forums? Briefing sessions? I'm not sure if a briefing session is caught by the definition of council meetings. It is a meeting of the council, but it's really a briefing session. It's not a meeting where we have a vote, of course. Now, also, I don't think that should be the case. I mean, what's going to happen? Are things going to get worse? I've not heard of any scientific studies indicating that we're due for a wave 3 or wave 4. We haven't even had our second wave in WA. Perhaps that's the concern. Now, also, in terms of the reduced quorum, this is very interesting. The next paragraph says that, once again, the CEO, on our behalf, can make an application to the relevant minister reducing the quorum required to convene ordinary council meetings or special council meetings. It doesn't say what the reduction is or will be. Is it to be 10? Is it to be, 14, 13, 12, etc., 10, 6, 2? What is to be the reduction? We just can't give an open carte blanche authorisation or delegation for the CEO to determine what the reduction is. We need to be consulted as councillors. We are the elected members. The other point too I should have added at the outset is that at the start of each new year following council elections, we determine what the council dates will be for our meetings, etc., etc., etc. It's actually voted upon by a formal resolution. Is it appropriate that we should outsource our right to have a say in that to the CEO and the Mayor? I think not. I think that's wrong. And also paragraph 3 gives to the CEO the power to make any and all changes to services, including ceasing or providing new services, and service levels are deemed necessary. Now, and also you note in paragraph 4, it actually authorises the CEO to defer community consultation and engagement that is not otherwise required statutorily or by legislation. So all of these 4 paragraphs have the single preamble paragraph, which has about 7 different provisos if you read between the lines. And just to recap, then I'll shut up, I promise. That council, for a period of 6 months from the date of this resolution, and contingent on the extent of a COVID-19 outbreak as determined by the CEO, that could affect providing services and facilities. 1, 2, 3, 4. I don't believe this is necessary. I don't believe it's appropriate. The WA is the process of opening up. The game will be over by the time of the next federal election. There'll be no need to play the game anymore, and we won't have to be the only hermit state on the face of the planet Earth. Thank you.
Mr. CEO, would you like to respond to some of those questions?
Perhaps just at a very high level. The intention of the delegation, similar to other delegations Council has provided during the pandemic, is to provide an opportunity to make adjustments should the need arise based on a potential impact of COVID. I think Councillor Baker is right in as far as the beginning is somewhat qualified on the unknown outbreak and then the impact of that potential outbreak. So it is a delegation that's informed on the impact of a potential COVID on city services and ability to meet in person and an ability to reduce a quorum should that be required due to the impact of COVID. I think the recommendations speak to addressing those scenarios should they occur and providing council a linkage to the event having to occur before those elements are actioned.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Speakers for? Speakers against?
Another question, Madam Mayor?
Councillor Baker.
Thank you. This question is addressed to the CEO. Dan, wouldn't you agree that in view of the wording of the preamble, you yourself are the sole determinant as to whether paragraphs 1 to 4 inclusive would apply in any situation, because you determine the trigger mechanism for the operation of those 4 paragraphs. Would you accept that that is the case? The second line reads, COVID-19 outbreak as determined by the CEO. In other words, in your absolute and unfettered or perhaps reasonable discretion, you make the determination which triggers 1 to 4. I think you'd agree. That's on the wording of the recommendation. I think you would agree.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Mr. CEO, can you please respond?
That is the intent of the wording because council can only delegate to myself, so that is the only option available to council. And we are dealing with a pandemic of unknown consequences, and in the event of a pandemic that impacts on operations and services, decisions need to be made quite rapidly. They can only either be made by council or delegated to the CEO. They are the only 2 options available.
Thank you, Mr. CEO. Further questions? No speakers for, no speakers against. Putting the recommendation, moved Councillor Rowe, seconded Councillor Miles. If you could please cast your vote. Declare, we've got one. We need somebody who's not voted. There we go. So that's carried with 2 objections, being Councillor Baker and Councillor Nguyen. Thank you. Moving through to item 9, motions on notice. Councillor Baker and seconded for the, so we've got moved Councillor Baker for the motion on notice. We have a seconder. Thank you, Councillor Berry. Councillor Baker, you wish to speak to this item?
I'm not sure if elected members have had the opportunity of reviewing our CAT's local law, but in a nutshell, it's been enforced since 28th of July 2016. It's not been reviewed since that date. It's an interesting CAT's local law because when you check the enforcement section at the rear of the local law, there's only one offence. It provides for only one offence only, and that is an offence under clause 2.62, which refers to the conditions attached to a cattery. Okay, a cattery. Yet, notwithstanding that, in the definition section, there's a definition of what a nuisance means. There's a definition of what's called material damage caused to land or property or other persons by cats, native fauna, etc. So, in a nutshell, that definition regarding nuisance isn't repeated within the CAT law because, in effect, the CAT law defines the word nuisance, but it doesn't create any offences in relation to cats being a nuisance on the part of their owners or someone with the care of a cat. in a nutshell, it's a case where our local law does need to be reviewed. Other local government authorities in WA and elsewhere have updated their local laws. The primary concern amongst many ratepayers who I've discussed this with is the issue of cat owners being responsible for the behaviour of their cats at night time. Cats are generally nocturnal animals, of course, and that is the primary concern. Cats straying, cats damaging plants and gardens, killing fauna. Also, if you like, being a nuisance late at night, exciting dogs, what have you. It needs to be reviewed. Look, I'm a cat lover, by the way. Definitely, I've got 3 dead cats in our backyard. The last one I had to scrape off the road with an egg flip, but wasn't a nice procedure. But it was a plastic egg flip. I washed it thoroughly afterwards. But look, there's a need to review it. I'll just shut up and leave it to others to speak. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Baker. Councillor Berry?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm all for actually having a look at the update on the Cat Act. I'd like to just declare I am an owner of 4 cats. I do have a special cat licence to keep 4 cats, and they are all registered with the City of Wanneroo. I agree with Councillor Baker that we do have an issue with cats that do are nuisances, that do impact our native wildlife. And I do think we should put it out to public consultation to have a look at the Cat Act. I'd just like to add that when you look at the registration fees for dogs and cats is exactly the same, but there is no incentive for cat owners to actually register their cats currently. They don't get cat parks or cat beaches or cat litter bags or whatever else you want to say. I think it would be very timely to look at actually doing some education around responsible pet ownership, not only cats. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Berry. Speakers for? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I can see the excitement on my fellow councillor's face and how excited she is to review the local cat law if passed by council. I admit I'm not really a cat lover, but since meeting Roomba, one of Councillor Berry's therapy cats, I can see where the passion comes from. I do share the views of my fellow councillors that are in support of this review, as I've been contacted by many of my constituents in regards to roaming cats and the need for better controls to be in place in recent times. Our local cat law is from 2016 and needs to be updated to reflect our community expectations, and strongly supports our strategic community plan on providing strong community leadership and a clear direction. I support this review of the city's cat local law and encourage my fellow councillors to support this motion on notice by Councillor Baker and Councillor Berry. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Wright. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Miles?
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. Look, I support the consultation going ahead. It is true, cat law from 2016. We are in a totally different place. The community's in a totally different mindset today. People that I know that own cats don't allow them outside of their property. In fact, they have netting all the way around their properties so their cats can't get off property. And they are the proper animal lovers that actually make sure that their animals are kept inside. The other parts of it is people do let their cats out, which goes out there and interferes with Mother Nature. You find dead birds in your garden from their wings broken and stuff like that. I do live in an area that has several cats near me. Fortunately enough, I don't get any coming into the property anymore since we made some changes. They are a nuisance when it comes to using outside your front doors and places like that as a litter box. The odour can be quite prohibitive. And I do understand administration has from time to time tried to deal with residents that have got nuisance cats nearby, maybe trying to get cat traps, catching them and then taking them down the animal haven or whatever. But I think we do need to sort of obviously have a look at this. As the report states, other local councils have already started this process, if not already adopted new local laws to restrict the movement of cats. I'm in support of that. And can't wait to see how the consultation goes from here.
Thank you, Councillor Miles. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Rowe?
Thanks, Mayor, and I do thank Councillors Baker and Berry for putting up this motion on notice. I do support it as well. I think the consultation is very important, just even from my experience for residents approaching me. I suppose one of the things that I'm hoping can come out of the consultation is a greater level of awareness and education as well, because we often get questions about what are the powers of the ranger when it comes to managing cats. I suppose as well, another thing that is important to me is managing those expectations, because while the local government can have some authority in this, there is also the individual responsibility of the pet owner, and hopefully clarifying things like the role of the animal care facility or potentially cat haven as well. So very happy to support the motion on notice, and I'm hopeful that the consultation can lead to some good outcomes for the community as a whole.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Huntley.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm actually for this. I think we should review this, but I do think that we need to be very mindful of the fact that as car drivers, we probably kill as much wildlife as anything else, and certainly as human beings, we seem to clear every bit of space we've got on the planet. So at the end of the day, there's not much room for anyone else anyway. I do think that we have to remember a cat is not a dog, and I do think we have to remember that there are some very, very responsible owners who actually do control their cats. So what we should be mindful of is that we're aiming to make sure that we capture the people who are not responsible owners, who do not neuter and spay, who do not chip their animal, and who do not care for their animal. And we mustn't be seen to actually be punishing the people who actually look after their animals. So I do think we need to be very, very mindful, but I do think this should go out to public consultation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Huntley. Speakers against? Speakers for? There's no right of reply required of your motion on you wish to ask a question of your motion on notice? Well, you don't really need to close debate, Councillor Baker, because nobody spoke against it. Thank you. Councillors, if you could please cast your vote. Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. Moving on to the next item, motion on notice, MN02, Councillor Herridge. And Councillor Herridge, do you have a seconder? Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Councillor Herridge, would you like to speak to your motion on notice?
Thank you, Mayor. I'd like to first thank administration for their assistance in guiding me through my first motion on notice, and ask Council to consider supporting this in changing the scope of a previous lighting project for Warradale Park in Lansdale from passive lighting around the lake to continue in the option of lighting for the nearby skate park. Warradale Park is a significant community asset and is widely utilised by residents locally as well as those in neighbouring suburbs. The skate park is located not far from the lake and the path in which the original scope of works was investigated. Previous South Ward councillors with administration began the passive lighting project for the park in 2017 with the intention to light the path surrounding the lake. The investigation gave to having the project listed in the long-term plan of 17 and 18, and residents were very much looking forward to seeing it come to fruition. The scope actually offered for 3 options and estimates for lighting, all with varying issues arising to them and the cost of some considerably high. I think it would be remiss of us if we didn't see this project through for residents, being such an investigation of time and funds has already been spent, and I'd like to see the scope changed to the lighting of the skate park only. This change in scope would take into consideration many of the issues and the higher cost, and make the project more attainable whilst fulfilling residents' long-term expectations of lights for the park. Considering the project was also to obtain approval from the Department of Environment and Conservation, it would be a shame to not act on this or utilise the funding that has already been spent and the remaining allocated. The skate park is used at all times of the day and night and can unfortunately also be a gathering space for some of our younger residents of an evening and late into the night. The positioning of the skate park is hidden from the roadside by surrounding trees, making it an ideal space for being not easily seen. Lighting the space will not only be an added security aspect for the kids and residents, but also ensure that the skate park can be used at times it wouldn't normally be to make use of the space that we have invested in. We currently also have a petition at Council from residents to upgrade and light another skate park within the city, proving the need by residents for lights for skate parks. I've also been asking for resident feedback recently on an online survey and during coffee catch-ups, and it's definitely been a topic of discussion. It would be wonderful to see this project move forward for the residents and the city. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Herridge. Seconded, Councillor Rowe.
Thanks, Mayor. I think I can probably add very little to that, other than to just reiterate the three reasons that I think I'm supporting this, which is first, security. That additional lighting will mean that that facility can be used well into the evening, particularly over those winter months. I've been to the park on many occasions and I can say that it is very well utilised. The second being location, the fact that the park is used by the cricket club, by the footy club as well. So you're going to have kids wanting to use that skate park. And then the third is just the demographic reasons. Lansdale is probably one of the suburbs that has the highest proportion of young families. So the fact that it will be located in a good spot, and also very close to where we're going to be having the Lansdale Library and Youth Innovation Hub. So it's going to be a very good proposal that I'm happy to second.
Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Speakers for? Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I'm more than happy to support this project by Councillor Herridge. This motion on notice is investment for the southern suburbs and also for our youth, so I'm more than happy to support this. Thank you.
Thank you. Speakers against? Speakers for? Councillor Nguyen.
Likewise, I do want to support this motion because I know that this area in the past has had some problems with antisocial behaviour. I was told by a resident just opposite the park that one of their houses was egg and on a few occasions, and that's been reported to police. So I think more lighting in the area is certainly better. It will deter this kind of behaviour in the future. So this is a great investment for the community. So absolutely support this.
Thank you. Speakers against? Speakers for? Putting the motion on notice, if you could please cast your vote. Declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. I think Councillor Baker has left. Moving on to MN03, Councillor Miles. Move Councillor Miles.
Thank you. Yes, thank you, Mayor. Councillors, I would like you to support the Wanneroo Cell 1 developer contribution. I too had many drafts of this. I do want to thank administration for their patience while I was dealing with this. And I think during the process, poor old Emil had to leave to go and look after children as well. This item came up last year and through a report presented by administration about the Cell 1 and other cells. And administration obviously had a different thought process at that time. When the Mr. Kyle White, who was acting on behalf of the developers in that area, mainly Cedar Woods, was requesting a payment back, a prepayment back from the cell because of the extra money that had been paid into there. At the time, it was still not quite enough to obviously purchase the land if we needed to go ahead and purchase the land in the next 12 months. The request from the from the developers was $3,092,677. What I did is on page 523, councillors, I did the little text box with the balance. Currently, there's just over $5 million in there. If we prepay the developers of $3,092,677, that still leaves the balance of $1.909 million. If we had to pay out for the historic POS down in Tapping, and also had to pay out for the land that is required off Corrosa Road the other area, then we would be up for roughly $1.8 million in costs. But that, in the unlikely event, that's what would happen over the next 12 months, because we've got to remember that in 6 months' time, administration's going to be going through these cells again and doing all the correct stuff. The interesting fact is part of the lots that are still needing to be sold is one of the farms that the owners have just retired on last year. They are sort of negotiating with different people on the possibility of selling. If we actually had a look at the money that still would need to come in from the land that is already zoned urban, and we use the old scheme base, which is 9 lots per 100, and I can tell you that any new sale that we do on the coast is anything up to 15 or 20 lots per hectare. So this is a very conservative future income, which is going to come over the next probably 3 to 5 years. So there's still, even at 9 lots per 100, $1.693 million to come in, further come in. And I think Mr. White indicated today that income over the coming years, probably the next 3 to 5 years, maybe anything up to $3 million. So I'm very confident that the city's not going to be out of pocket on any of this. The interesting thing I wasn't made aware of until recently was the fact that the POS that is required next and alongside a large school site doesn't actually get triggered until the school actually wants to buy their site. So we've got some sort of buffer there. The other interesting fact is we have never as a city compulsory acquired land for public open space. The only time the city's ever done compulsory acquisitions, to the best of my knowledge, is for land for roads and items like that, dualling a road or as we know in other reports that we've seen, little corners of land, and then you get caught up in some very, very interesting court cases. So I'm asking councillors to support the motion to do the payback of $3,092,677 as per the report. The report is laid out, is quite clear, and I put the recommendation, Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Miles, and Councillor Civic seconding.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Look, there's not much further to add. I am happy for this to go out. I think it's been going a long time, and administration is looking into all the other cells to try and tidy them up, but some have still a fair way to go. But in terms of this one, there's not many properties left, and as Councillor Miles said, two of the two brothers are retiring, so they're hopefully in the process of negotiation. And he's also rightly said that the city doesn't purchase public open space, but public open space is purchased by the cell, and the cell funds will purchase that. The money in this cell doesn't belong to the city. We are custodians of it, and we've now reached the ups and downs of development throughout the East Wanneroo area. This is the old East Wanneroo area, and these monies are going to have to be distributed virtually in the next few years while we tidy them up. But having said that, I'm just hopeful that there won't be any shortfall. I don't think there will be. And I only have one question to ask, and that is of the estimated balance of full development at $1.79 million. That will be distributed to, are there any smaller developers that haven't been paid out of this exercise at this point in time, other than the major developers as we're here tonight? But in essence, that is a question that I'd like answered, but in essence, I'm supportive that we move on with this particular process and expedite the funds. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Civic, and I'll direct your question to Mr Dixon.
Thank you, and through you, Madam Mayor, any excess funds that are there at the closure of the cell will be distributed proportionally to those who have made previous contributions.
Thank you. Speakers for? Speakers against? Putting the motion on notice, if you could please cast your vote. I declare that carried with one objection. Councillor Sangali. Thank you. Moving on to, and gentlemen, if we were able, we would have brought that motion on notice to the beginning of the agenda, but given it's a motion on notice, it does stay in situ at that part of the agenda. So thank you for staying with us for the meeting. And take care and drive home carefully. Thank you. Item 10, urgent business, we have none. Item 11, confidential. Can I please have a mover and seconder to go behind closed doors? Thank you, Councillor Rowe. Thank you, Councillor Miles. If I could please ask you to cast your votes to go behind closed doors. I declare that carried unanimously. Thank you. So, councillors, in relation to confidential item CR010222, Bakota and Anor versus City of Wanneroo land compensation claim, was moved Councillor Wright and seconded Councillor Berry. That council authorises the Chief Executive Officer to offer a settlement to the plaintiffs in the Bakota and Anor versus City of Wanneroo land compensation claim pursuant to external legal advice and in line with the recommendations of this report, and that was carried unanimously. Moving on to item 12, date of the next meeting. Our next briefing session will be held on the 8th of March at 6 p.m. and I declare the meeting closed at 8:37 p.m. Thank you very much.